Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.E.'s Valiant and watched the stars through the massive viewing screen. The ship hummed with quiet energy around him as his crew prepared for what would become humanity's first real war in space. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council had come to Earth with their desperate request for help, and now 12 human warships were racing through hyperspace toward a battle that would change everything. The bridge doors opened with a soft hiss, and Commander Alex Hayes walked over to Morrison's command chair. Hayes carried a datapad filled with the latest intelligence reports about their enemy, the Zephyrian Empire. The tall commander had served with Morrison for 8 years and knew how to read his captain's mood. Today, Morrison looked troubled, which was unusual for a man who had never lost a battle. "Sir, we have new information from the Council about Zephyrian fleet movements," Hayes said as he handed over the datapad. "Intelligence suggests they have 60 ships in the target system, mostly heavy cruisers and destroyers. Our 12 ships should be more than enough to handle them." Morrison took the pad and scrolled through the tactical data. The Zephyrians had been conquering Council worlds for 2 years now, and every report showed the same pattern. They would arrive in a system with overwhelming numbers, challenge the local defense forces to battle, and then systematically destroy every ship that opposed them. What made it worse was that they seemed to enjoy the fighting, taking their time to defeat each enemy vessel individually rather than ending battles quickly. "What about their combat doctrine?" Morrison asked. "Do we know how they actually fight?" Hayes shrugged. "The Council says they prefer direct confrontation. No stealth tactics, no long-range bombardment. They close to medium range and slug it out until one side is destroyed. Honestly, sir, it sounds like they fight the way humans did 300 years ago. All honor and glory with not much tactical thinking." Dr. Kate Russell approached from her station near the science console. The fleet's xenobiologist had been studying every scrap of information about the Zephyrians since the mission began, trying to understand what kind of species humanity was about to fight. She was young for such an important position, but her work with alien cultures had impressed everyone in Starfleet Command. "Captain, I need to express some concerns about our intelligence on the Zephyrians," she said. "The Council has given us extensive data on their ships and weapons, but almost nothing about their society or culture. I find that very unusual for a species that has been in contact with the Council for over 50 years. Morrison looked up from the datapad. Russell's concerns matched his own growing unease about this mission. In his 20 years of military service, incomplete intelligence had always been a warning sign that something was about to go wrong. "What specifically are we missing?" he asked. Russell pulled up a holographic display showing what they knew about Zephyrian society. The display was surprisingly empty. "We know they call themselves an empire, and that they have a warrior culture that values combat, but that's about it. We don't know their religious beliefs, their social structure, or even their basic customs. For a species that's been fighting wars for decades, the Council seems remarkably uninterested in understanding them." Hayes frowned. "Maybe the Council doesn't think cultural information matters in a military situation. When someone is shooting at you, their poetry and music aren't exactly relevant." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that worries me," Russell replied. "Every species we've encountered has some kind of cultural framework that shapes how they approach conflict. The Altarians negotiate before fighting. The Keplerians use mathematical models to minimize casualties. And the vegan collective treats war like a business transaction. The Zephyrians must have their own approach, but we don't know what it is." Morrison stood and walked to the viewing screen. Outside, stars stretched into lines as the ship traveled faster than light toward their destination. In 6 hours they would drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, where 3 Council worlds were under attack by a Zephyrian fleet. The Council's own forces were already there, but they were losing badly and had called for human assistance. Ambassador Carter said the Council was impressed by our military efficiency during the first contact protocols. Morrison said, "They saw our ships, our weapons, and our tactical systems, and decided we were exactly what they needed to stop the Zephyrian advance." Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres looked up from his communication station. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from Ambassador Carter on Earth. She says the situation in the Kepler system is getting worse. The Council fleet has lost 12 ships in the last day." Morrison nodded for Torres to put the transmission. On the main screen, Ambassador Lisa Carter appeared as a flickering hologram, her usual diplomatic composure showing cracks of strain and worry. Behind her, Morrison could see the busy operations center at Starfleet headquarters on Earth. "Captain Morrison, I hope you're making good time to the battle zone," Carter said. "The Council is becoming desperate. They've never faced an enemy quite like the Zephyrians, and their usual tactics aren't working. They need human military doctrine to turn this around. Ambassador Dr. Russell has raised some concerns about gaps in our cultural intelligence on the Zephyrians," Morrison replied. "Can the Council provide more information about Zephyrian society and customs?" Carter looked confused. "Cultural information? Captain, this is a military operation against an aggressive enemy. The Council needs you to stop the Zephyrian fleet, not write a sociology paper about them. They've provided everything you need to know about Zephyrian weapons and ship capabilities." Dr. Russell stepped forward. "Ambassador, understanding an enemies. Culture can be just as important as understanding their technology. It helps predict their tactics and avoid unnecessary conflicts." "Dr. Russell, I appreciate your academic perspective, but we're talking about a species that has been systematically conquering and destroying peaceful worlds," Carter said with growing impatience. "The time for cultural understanding was before. They started this war. Now we need human military efficiency to protect innocent lives." A transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew in uncomfortable silence. Morrison returned to his command chair and looked at the tactical display showing their projected arrival at the Kepler system. 12 human ships against 60 Zephyrian. Vessels should have been a hopeless battle, but human technology and tactics had proven superior to anything else in the galaxy. During their brief contact with other species, Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos called out from the sensor station. "Captain, we're receiving distress signals from the battle zone. It sounds like the Council fleet is taking heavy casualties." Morrison made his decision. Cultural intelligence would have to wait. People were dying, and the human fleet had the power to save them. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison. Prepare for battle stations when we drop out of hyperspace. We're going in to support our allies and stop the Zephyrian advance." Hayes activated the ship's internal communications. "All hands, this is Commander. Hayes, we will be entering combat in approximately 5 hours. This is humanity's first major space battle, and the galaxy is watching. Make us proud." As the crew prepared for battle, Morrison opened his personal log and began recording his thoughts. "We're about to engage an enemy we don't fully understand, supporting allies who seem more interested in our weapons than our wisdom. The Council believes human military efficiency is the answer to their problems, but I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something important about this conflict." He paused and looked around the bridge at his crew. These men and women represented the best of human military training and technology. They were confident, capable, and ready to fight for what they believed was right. But Morrison had learned in his years of command that being right wasn't always enough if you didn't understand the full situation. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you defeat too easily, he concluded in his log. "I hope we're not about to learn that lesson the hard way." The U.S. Valiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system with 11 other human warships following close behind. Captain Jake Morrison felt his stomach settle as the ship's artificial gravity adjusted to normal space. And then he saw what they were facing on the main viewing screen. The battle was already raging near the inner planets, with bright flashes of weapons fire lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. Lieutenant, Commander Ben Torres immediately began scanning all communication frequencies to get a clear picture of the tactical situation. His console lit up with dozens of distress signals, tactical reports, and desperate pleas for assistance from Council ships scattered throughout the system. The chaos of battle filled the bridge speakers with overlapping voices in several alien languages. Captain, I'm reading approximately 60 Zephyrian vessels engaged with over 100 Council ships. Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos reported from her sensor station. The Council forces have superior numbers, but they're losing badly. I count 18 Council ships destroyed in just the last hour. Commander Alex Hayes studied the tactical display with growing amazement. Sir, this doesn't make sense from a military standpoint. The Council has almost twice as many ships, but they're fighting like they've never seen combat before. Look at their formations. Morrison moved to the tactical station and watched the battle unfold on the three-dimensional display. The Council ships were arranged in loose clusters, trying to surround individual Zephyrian vessels with multiple attackers. It should have been an effective strategy, but somehow the Zephyrians were cutting through the Council formations like they were made of paper. Dr. Kate Russell joined them at the tactical display, her scientific instruments recording everything about the alien combat patterns. Captain, I'm seeing something very unusual in the way the Zephyrians fight. Their ships move in very specific geometric patterns, almost like they're following some kind of predetermined choreography. What do you mean? Morrison asked. Doc Russell pointed to a group of Zephyrian heavy cruisers that were engaging a Council battle group. Watch how they approach. Each ship follows an exact path, maintains precise distances from its neighbors, and even their weapons fire follows a rhythmic pattern. It's not random combat. It's more like a dance. Torres looked up from his communications console with a puzzled expression. Captain, I'm intercepting Zephyrian communications, and it's very strange. Before each engagement, they broadcast what sounds like formal challenges to specific Council ships. They're not just attacking randomly. They're actually inviting individual enemies to fight them. Hayes shook his head in disbelief. They're fighting duels in the middle of a fleet battle. No wonder the Council is losing. While the Zephyrians are focused on one-on-one combat, the Council is trying to use mass tactics and overwhelming firepower. Morrison watched as 3 Council destroyers converged on a single Zephyrian cruiser. The alien ship should have been destroyed quickly, but instead it maneuvered with incredible grace between its attackers, firing precisely timed shots that disabled each Council vessel without completely destroying them. When the engagement ended, the Zephyrian ship broadcast something that Torres translated as a victory song. They're not trying to end this battle quickly, Morrison realized. They're treating it like some kind of sporting event or ceremony. Each fight has to follow their rules, even if it means taking longer and losing more ships. A new distress signal cut through the communication chatter, this one coming from a Council medical transport that was carrying wounded from earlier battles. 3 Zephyrian heavy destroyers had broken away from the main engagement and were moving to intercept the defenseless hospital ship. The transport's captain was broadcasting desperate pleas for assistance, but no Council warships were close enough to help. Morrison made his decision without hesitation. All ships, this is Morrison. We're moving to intercept those Zephyrian destroyers. Hayes, give me a firing solution on all 3 targets. Santos, I want full power to weapons and shields. The human fleet accelerated toward the Chew medical transport with a coordination and speed that neither side of the ongoing battle had ever witnessed. The 12 human ships moved like parts of a single organism, their formation shifting and adapting as they closed the distance to their targets. The Zephyrian destroyers were so focused on their prey that they didn't notice the approaching human fleet until it was too late. All ships, engage targets, Morrison ordered. What happened next lasted only 90 seconds, but it changed everything about the battle. The human ships opened fire with weapons designed for maximum efficiency rather than ceremony or honor. Their targeting systems locked onto critical components of the Zephyrian vessels, while their electronic warfare systems jammed enemy communications and sensors simultaneously. The lead Zephyrian destroyer exploded in a brilliant flash as human missiles found its reactor core. The second ship tried to turn and fight, but concentrated fire from 4 human vessels tore through its armor like it was made of cloth. The third destroyer managed to fire a few shots before it too was reduced to floating debris. Targets eliminated, Hayes reported with satisfaction. No damage to any human vessels. The medical transport is safe. But as the human fleet moved to assist other beleaguered council ships, something changed in the remaining Zephyrian formations. Torres picked up a shift in their communications, and the orderly battle patterns that had defined the engagement began to break apart. Zephyrian ships that had been fighting with ritual precision suddenly seemed confused and disorganized. "Captain, I'm getting very strange readings from the Zephyrian fleet," Santos reported. "Their formation integrity is collapsing, but not because they're retreating. It's more like they don't know what to do next." Dr. Russell was working frantically with her translation programs, trying to decode the flood of Zephyrian communications that followed the destruction of their 3 ships. "Captain, I'm picking up what sounds like distress calls, but not the kind you'd expect from a military defeat. These sound more like expressions of grief or mourning." Torres confirmed Russell's observation. "Sir, the Zephyrian communications have completely changed in tone. Before our attack, they were broadcasting what sounded like battle songs and formal challenges. Now, it's something entirely different. My translation software keeps picking up one phrase over and over again." "What phrase?" Morrison asked. "The sacred dance is broken," Torres replied. "That's the closest translation I can get, but I don't understand what it means." Morrison stared at the tactical display as his fleet moved through the battle zone, saving council ships with devastating efficiency. Every human attack succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. Zephyrian vessels that had been dominating the battle just minutes before were now easy targets for human weapons and tactics. But something was wrong with the way the enemy was responding to their defeats. Hayes reported another successful engagement. "Captain, we just eliminated 2 more Zephyrian cruisers that were threatening a council supply convoy. Still no damage to our ships." But Russell looked more worried with each human victory. "Captain, I think we're missing something important about what's happening here. The Zephyrians aren't just losing battles. They seem to be experiencing some kind of psychological breakdown. Their communication patterns suggest extreme distress that goes far beyond normal combat losses." Morrison nodded grimly. He had started this engagement feeling confident about humanity's military superiority, but now he was beginning to understand that they had stumbled into something much more complex than a simple fleet battle. The Zephyrians weren't just an enemy. To be defeated, they were a completely alien culture with their own rules and expectations about how warfare should be conducted. "Keep monitoring their communications," he ordered Russell. "I have a feeling we're about to learn something very important about our enemy, and I'm not sure we're going to like what we discover." The battle in the Kepler 442 system transformed completely once the human fleet joined the fight. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the UES, valiant as his 12 ships turned what had been a desperate last stand by Council forces into a one-sided massacre of Zephyrian vessels. Within 2 hours of their arrival, The humans had destroyed over 20 enemy ships without taking a single casualty. But victory felt wrong somehow. Morrison had fought enough battles to know what defeated enemies looked like, and the Zephyrians weren't responding like any military force he had ever encountered. Instead of regrouping for counterattacks or attempting strategic withdrawals, they seemed to be falling apart from the inside. Commander Alex Hayes coordinated the fleet's movements from his tactical station, directing human ships to intercept Zephyrian formations with ruthless efficiency. The UE's defiant under Captain Susan. Powell had perfected the art of appearing behind enemy vessels using advanced stealth technology. The U's Resilient, commanded by Captain Greg Murphy, specialized in long-range missile attacks that destroyed targets before they could even see who was shooting at them. The UES Fortress, with Captain Linda Jackson, served as a mobile weapons platform that could outgun any 3 Zephyrian ships combined. Captain Morrison to all human vessels. Morrison broadcast on the fleet command frequency. Continue current tactical patterns. Focus fire on any Zephyrian ship that threatens Council forces. Maintain formation integrity and watch for enemy counterattacks. But the expected counterattacks never came. Senior Chief Petty Officer Carlos Rivera had been monitoring Zephyrian communications since the battle began, and what he was hearing made less sense with each passing hour. The enemy broadcasts had shifted from organized military coordination to something that sounded more like religious panic. "Sir, I'm getting really strange readings from the Zephyrian fleet communications," Rivera reported to Morrison. "They're not talking about tactical situations or damage reports anymore. Most of their transmissions sound like prayers or lamentations." Dr. Kate Russell had been working frantically with the ship's computer systems to decode more of the Zephyrian language. Her translation algorithms were finally starting to make sense of the enemy communications, and what she was discovering made her more concerned with each new message she decoded. "Captain, I think I'm beginning to understand what's happening here," Russell said as she approached Morrison's command chair. "The Zephyrians aren't just fighting a war the way we understand warfare. For them, combat appears to be some kind of religious or spiritual activity." Morrison frowned. "What do you mean, religious activity?" Russell activated a holographic display showing the battle patterns they had observed before human intervention. "Look at how the Zephyrians were fighting before we arrived. Their ship movements follow perfect geometric patterns, their weapons. Fire maintains specific rhythmic sequences, and every engagement begins with formal announcements that sound like ritual invocations." Hayes looked up from his tactical console. "Are you saying they treat battles like church services?" "Something like that," Russell replied. "From what I can translate of their communications, combat for the Zephyrians is a sacred activity that must be performed according to very specific rules and traditions. They call it something that translates roughly as the sacred dance of war." Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres had been listening to the conversation while monitoring enemy transmissions. "Dr. Russell, that would explain why their communications changed so dramatically after we started attacking them. They keep broadcasting about defilement and cosmic violations." Morrison studied the tactical display showing the current positions of all ships in the battle. The human fleet had scattered Zephyrian formations that had maintained perfect order for hours before their arrival. What he had interpreted as superior human tactics might actually have been the equivalent of walking into an alien church and smashing their religious artifacts. "How bad is this?" Morrison asked Russell. "Are we talking about offending their cultural sensibilities, or something more serious?" Russell's expression was grim. "Captain, based on what I'm translating from their communications, I think we've done something much worse than just defeating them in battle. We've committed what they consider to be a form of blasphemy. Every time we use our tactical advantages to destroy their ships quickly and efficiently, we're violating sacred rules about how warfare is supposed to be conducted." A new alarm sounded on the bridge as Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos detected massive hyperspace signatures appearing at the edge of the system. Morrison had been expecting Zephyrian reinforcements, but the scale of what was arriving far exceeded his worst projections. "Captain, I'm reading multiple hyperspace exits," Santos reported with growing alarm. "Initial count shows over 50 new contacts, but they're not all Zephyrian ships. I'm detecting vessel types from at least 6 different alien species." Hayes checked his tactical database and confirmed Santos's readings. "Sir, those are Altarian heavy cruisers, Keplerian science vessels configured for combat, and even some vegan collective merchant ships that have been armed for war. This isn't just Zephyrian reinforcements, it's a coalition fleet." Morrison felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. "Torres, are you picking up any communications from the new arrivals?" Torres worked frantically at his console, trying to decode the flood of transmissions from the approaching alien armada. "Captain, I'm getting broadcasts in multiple languages, but the translation software is picking up common themes. They're talking about purification, cleansing, and something called a holy obligation." Dr. Russell had gone pale as she listened to the enemy communications. "Captain, I think the Zephyrians have invoked some kind of religious protocol that transcends normal political boundaries. They're calling for other species to join them in what they consider a sacred war against humanity." The tactical display updated as more alien ships continued to arrive in the system. Morrison counted over 200 vessels from dozens of different species, many of whom had been neutral or even hostile to the Zephyrian Empire just days earlier. Now they were forming a massive coalition united by a single purpose. "How is this possible?" Hayes asked. "Half these species were fighting each other last month. Now they're working together against us?" Russell was translating more enemy communications as quickly as her computer systems could process them. "Commander, it appears that the Zephyrians have convinced other species that humanity represents some kind of cosmic threat that must be eliminated. They're saying that our combat methods are so fundamentally wrong that they corrupt the spiritual balance of the universe." Morrison realized that his fleet was now facing a situation far beyond anything they had prepared for. What had started as a simple military assistance mission had somehow escalated into a galaxy-wide religious war against humanity. The 12 human ships that had seemed so powerful against 60 Zephyrian vessels were now trapped in a system with over 200 enemy ships converging on their position. "All human vessels, this is Captain Morrison," he broadcast on the fleet command frequency. "We have a rapidly evolving tactical situation. Prepare for defensive operations and await further orders." Captain Powell's voice came back over the communication system from the UES Defiant. "Jake, what the hell did we walk into here? These aliens are acting like we're some kind of plague that needs to be wiped out." Captain Murphy from the U's Resilient added his concerns. "Sir, our long-range sensors are detecting even more hyperspace signatures. This coalition fleet is still growing." Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. These men and women had joined this mission, believing they were helping defend innocent worlds from an aggressive empire. Now they found themselves surrounded by hundreds of alien warships, whose crews considered them to be enemies of the cosmic order itself. "Dr. Russell, how much time do we have before that coalition fleet reaches us?" Morrison asked. Russell checked her calculations. "At their current speed, approximately 4 hours until the first wave of ships enters weapons range." Morrison nodded grimly. In 4 hours, he would have to decide whether to fight a hopeless battle against overwhelming odds, attempt to escape and abandon the council worlds they had come to protect, or find some way to communicate with enemies who considered humanity to be a spiritual abomination that threatened the very foundation of their universe. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the briefing room of the UES Valiant with his senior officers, staring at a holographic display that showed their impossible situation. The alien coalition fleet had grown to over 300 ships from 17 different species, all united in their determination to destroy the human fleet. What made it worse was that many of these species had never cooperated before. Yet now they worked together with religious fervor against humanity. Admiral Patricia Brooks appeared as a flickering hologram, her emergency transmission coming directly from Earth Command. Her face showed the strain of coordinating humanity's response to a crisis that nobody had seen coming. Behind her, Morrison could see the busy operations center, where analysts were trying to understand how a simple military assistance mission had triggered what appeared to be a holy war. Captain Morrison, the situation has escalated far beyond our original projections, Admiral Brooks began. We're receiving reports that Zephyrian fleets are mobilizing in 16 other star systems. More concerning, they're being joined by species that were previously neutral or even hostile to the Zephyrian Empire. Commander Alex Hayes leaned forward. Admiral, how is that possible? We checked the political situation in this sector before the mission began. Most of these species barely tolerate each other, let alone fight together. Brooks nodded grimly. Our intelligence services are working around the clock to understand what's happening. But preliminary reports suggest the Zephyrians have invoked some kind of religious protocol that transcends normal political boundaries. They're claiming that humanity poses a fundamental threat to what they call cosmic order. Dr. Kate Russell had been working without sleep for the past 12 hours, using every available computer system to decode Zephyrian religious texts and communications. What she had discovered painted a picture of alien spirituality that was completely foreign to human understanding. Admiral, I believe I can explain what's happening, Russell said as she activated her own holographic display. The Zephyrians don't view warfare the way humans do. For them, combat is a sacred ritual that maintains spiritual balance in the universe. There are specific rules about how battles must be fought, how enemies must be honored, and how victory and defeat must be acknowledged. Admiral Brooks frowned. Dr. Russell, are you saying they're upset because we're too good at fighting? It's more complex than that, Russell replied. Human tactical doctrine violates every principle of what the Zephyrians consider sacred combat. We use stealth technology, overwhelming firepower, and asymmetric tactics designed to minimize our own casualties, while maximizing enemy losses. From their perspective, we're not fighting a war, we're committing cosmic blasphemy. Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres had been monitoring alien communications throughout the briefing. Admiral, I'm intercepting broadcasts between Coalition fleet commanders. They're not talking about tactical objectives or strategic goals. Most of their communications sound like religious sermons about purifying the galaxy from human contamination. Morrison felt the weight of command pressing down on him as he realized the full scope of what his fleet had triggered. Admiral, what are our options? We came here to help the Council defend innocent worlds, but now we're facing a coalition that outnumbers us 25-1. Brooks was quiet for a moment, consulting with advisors who were off-screen. Captain, Starfleet Command has developed 3 possible courses of action. First, you could attempt a fighting withdrawal using your superior technology and mobility to avoid decisive engagement. Second, you could make a defensive stand in the asteroid fields of the outer system to negate enemy numerical advantages. Third, and this is the option I personally recommend, you could attempt direct communication with Zephyrian religious leaders to find some path toward understanding. Hayes shook his head in disbelief. Admiral, with respect, that third option sounds like surrender. These aliens consider us to be spiritual abominations. What makes you think they'll listen to anything we have to say? Because the alternative is a war that humanity cannot win, Brooks replied bluntly. Even if your fleet somehow defeats the coalition forces in this system, We're getting reports of similar coalitions forming throughout the galaxy. This isn't just a military conflict anymore. It's become an ideological crusade against everything humanity represents. Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos called out from the bridge. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting the first wave of coalition ships entering the outer system. Estimated time to weapons range is 2 hours. Morrison dismissed the briefing and returned to the bridge with his officers. The tactical display now showed a three-dimensional map of the Kepler 442 system, with hundreds of red contacts representing enemy vessels approaching from multiple directions. The 12 green dots that represented human ships looked pitifully small in comparison. Captain Powell to Fleet Command, came a transmission from the UES Defiant. Jake, my tactical officer, is recommending we use the asteroid field near the fourth planet for a defensive position. We could use the rocks for cover and force them to come at us in smaller groups. Captain Greg Murphy from the U's Resilient added his voice to the discussion. Sir, my long-range sensors show more enemy ships arriving every hour. If we're going to fight our way out of this system, we need to move now before they can completely surround us. Captain Linda Jackson from the UES Fortress offered a different perspective. Morrison, I've been listening to Dr. Russell's analysis of the alien communications. Maybe we should consider that fighting isn't the answer here. We might be dealing with something that military force can't solve. Morrison stared at the approaching enemy fleet and tried to think beyond the tactical considerations that had guided his entire career. Every instinct told him to position his ships for maximum defensive advantage and prepare to fight the kind of battle that humans excelled at. But Russell's research suggested that fighting might only make the situation worse. Dr. Russell, in your analysis of Zephyrian religious law, is there any precedent for resolving this kind of conflict without total warfare? Morrison asked. Russell consulted her data files. Captain, there are references to purification rituals and spiritual absolution for those who acknowledge their contamination and seek forgiveness. But the process appears to be very complex and would require us to submit to Zephyrian religious authority. Torres looked up from his communications console. Sir, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead coalition ship. It's broadcasting on all frequencies in multiple languages. Put it on the main screen. Morrison ordered. The view screen flickered and showed the bridge of an alien vessel, unlike anything in human databases. The being that appeared was clearly Zephyrian, with elongated features and deep-set eyes that seemed to burn with religious intensity. When it spoke, the ship's translation systems converted its words into heavily accented English. Human vessels, I am High War Priest Kentvar of the Sacred Talon. You have defiled the sacred patterns of combat and brought spiritual contamination to this holy space. Your presence corrupts the cosmic balance that has existed since the first. Stars burned in the darkness. Morrison stepped forward. High War Priest, I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human fleet. We came here to assist the Galactic Council in defending their worlds. We had no intention of violating any sacred laws or customs. Kentvar's expression showed a mixture of disgust and what might have been pity. Intention is irrelevant when the contamination is so complete. Your species fights without honor, kills without ceremony, and conquers without acknowledging the spiritual significance of combat. You are a plague upon the galaxy that must be cleansed. Morrison realized that he was facing a decision that would determine not just the fate of his fleet, but potentially the future of human expansion into the galaxy. He could order his ships to fight and probably take many enemies with them before being overwhelmed, or he could try something that went against every military principle he had ever learned. High War Priest, Morrison said carefully, if humanity has violated sacred laws through ignorance, is there a way for us to make amends? According to your religious traditions? Captain Jake Morrison made the most difficult decision of his military career as he stood on the bridge of the U.S. Valiant, surrounded by hundreds of enemy ships. Instead of ordering his fleet to fight or flee, he did something that went against every tactical principle he had ever learned. He ordered all human vessels to power down their weapons and broadcast a formal surrender on all Zephyrian religious frequencies. The reaction from his officers was immediate and harsh. Commander Alex Hayes turned from his tactical station with disbelief written across his face. "Sir, we can still fight our way out of this. Our ships are faster and more maneuverable than anything in that coalition fleet." But Dr. Kate Russell supported Morrison's decision. Her analysis of Zephyrian religious texts had revealed something crucial that might save not just the human fleet, but humanity's entire future in the galaxy. "Captain Hayes, fighting will only prove to the Zephyrians that we're irredeemably contaminated. Our only chance is to show them that we're capable of learning their sacred ways." Morrison activated the fleet communication system and addressed all 12 human ships. "All vessels, this is Captain Morrison. I am ordering a complete stand-down of all weapon systems. We will attempt to resolve this conflict through dialogue and cultural understanding rather than military force." The response from his ship commanders was predictably negative. Captain Susan Powell from the UES Defiant was the first to voice her objections. "Jake, this is insane. We're surrendering to an enemy that considers us cosmic abominations. They're not going to negotiate. They're going to destroy us." Captain Greg Murphy from the U's Resilient added his concerns. "Sir, even if they don't attack us immediately, what happens when word gets back to Earth that we surrendered without firing a shot? This will end all of our careers." But Captain Linda Jackson from the UES Fortress understood what Morrison was trying to accomplish. "Greg, our careers won't matter if we trigger a galaxy-wide war against humanity. Morrison is thinking beyond this single battle." As the human fleet powered down their weapons, High War Priest Kentvar appeared again on the main viewing screen. His expression showed surprise at the human response, as if he had expected them to fight to the death rather than seek any form of accommodation with Zephyrian religious law. "Human Morrison," Kentvar said in his heavily accented English, "your actions are unprecedented. Never has a species capable of such devastating combat chosen submission over defiance. Are you prepared to acknowledge that your methods of warfare are spiritually contaminated?" Morrison stepped forward, knowing that his next words would determine the fate of every human in the galaxy. "High War Priest, humanity came to this system with no knowledge of the sacred nature of combat. We fought according to our own traditions, which value efficiency and the preservation of our people's lives. We did not understand that we were violating cosmic laws." Dr. Russell had prepared Morrison for this moment by teaching him the proper forms of address and acknowledgement according to Zephyrian religious protocol. "We asked for instruction in the proper ways of warfare and offered to make amends according to your sacred traditions." Kentvar was silent for several minutes, consulting with other Zephyrian religious leaders who appeared on secondary screens around his command bridge. Their discussion was conducted in the ancient Zephyrian language that the human translation systems could barely comprehend. But Russell caught enough words to understand that humanity's response had created an unprecedented theological situation. "Human Morrison," Kentvar finally replied, "your species presents a unique challenge to our understanding of cosmic order. You possess the capability to wage war with devastating efficiency, yet you claim ignorance of combat's spiritual dimensions. This combination has never been encountered in our 1,000 years of maintaining galactic balance." Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres was monitoring communications throughout the Coalition fleet and reported that the alien discussions had shifted from plans for immediate attack to theological debates about how to handle humanity's unprecedented response. "Captain, I'm detecting significant disagreement among the Coalition species," Torres reported. Some are calling for our immediate destruction, but others seem to be advocating for what my translation software calls spiritual rehabilitation. Over the next several hours, Morrison found himself participating in the strangest negotiations of his life. Instead of discussing tactical withdrawals or territorial concessions, he was learning about Zephyrian concepts of sacred combat, ritual purification, and cosmic balance. Dr. Russell served as cultural interpreter, while Chief Petty, Officer Maria Santos, recorded everything for future reference. The process was unlike anything in human diplomatic experience. Morrison had to formally acknowledge that human combat methods violated spiritual laws, accept instruction in proper battle rituals, and agreed to restructure human military doctrine to incorporate Zephyrian religious elements. Captain Powell led a human delegation through purification ceremonies aboard Zephyrian ships that involved complex prayers and symbolic cleansing rituals. The breakthrough came when High War Priest Kent Var realized that humanity's tactical superiority combined with their cultural ignorance had created something that Zephyrian theology had never anticipated. Your species fights with the skill of ancient gods, but the understanding of children, he told Morrison during one of their lengthy discussions. This suggests that your contamination comes from ignorance rather than malice. The resolution required months of careful negotiation and cultural exchange. Humanity agreed to completely restructure their military doctrine to incorporate Zephyrian spiritual elements, while the Zephyrians acknowledged that humanity's violations had been unintentional, rather than deliberate blasphemy. The process involved human officers learning Zephyrian prayer forms, accepting training in sacred combat protocols, and participating in ritual ceremonies that transformed their understanding of warfare itself. 6 months later, Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Valiant, watching a very different kind of battle. Human and Zephyrian fleets were fighting side by side against a genuine threat to galactic peace. But now their joint operations followed the ritual patterns that gave combat sacred meaning. The humans had learned to announce their intentions before engaging enemies, to maintain proper geometric formations during battle, and to honor fallen opponents with ceremonial acknowledgments. Morrison now bore the title of War Brother, granted by High War Priest Kent Var, in recognition of humanity's transformation from cosmic contaminants to participants in the sacred dance of warfare. The human fleet still maintained their technological advantages, but they now employed those advantages within the spiritual framework that gave alien combat its deeper meaning. Dr. Russell had established a new department within Starfleet dedicated to xenocultural warfare doctrine, ensuring that future human conflicts would never again repeat the dangerous misunderstanding that had almost destroyed humanity's place in the galaxy. Her training programs taught human officers that cultural intelligence was as important as tactical superiority. In space, Russell told her students during their final examination, understanding why your enemy fights is more important than knowing how to defeat them. Our greatest victory was not the destruction of Zephyrian ships, but learning to see warfare through their eyes and finding a way to honor both our traditions and theirs. Morrison's personal log from that day reflected on the lesson learned at such great cost. We came to this system believing that military efficiency was the answer to every problem. We learned that sometimes the greatest strength is the willingness to admit ignorance and accept instruction from former enemies. Humanity's future in the galaxy depends not on our ability to defeat other species, but on our capacity to understand and respect the deeper meanings they find in conflict itself.